welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today we're going to start teenagerhood. What is it like to be a teenager? What kinds of growths do teenagers go through? And I think it'll be very interesting because there are many changes that occur in teenage periods. And the teenage period lasts from approximately 12 to 20 years old. And I say 20 years old because even though 21 is legal age for all kinds of things, at age 20, the brain is still not developed fully because it doesn't fully develop until about age 25. So technically, if you really want to look at the brain as the goal, and I do, then you say a 20-year-old is not quite an adult yet. Now, this period is called the period of storm and stress by many people. There's so much going on. There's so much physical change, and I'm going to run through all of that. There is a lot of physical change and growth, but along with that, the teenager is usually quite self-conscious, feels out of step, and they have a sense of idealism. And I really like working with teenagers because of that sense of idealism. They want things to be right. They want things to be fair. And when things aren't fair and aren't right, they're apt to do anything to get them right. I mean, they will demonstrate and so forth. And it's good, really good working with them because they have that sense of idealism. They're young enough so they're not cynical. They just want things to be right. Now, there is a lot of emotional crisis that goes on in teen periods. But that isn't necessarily caused by the physical changes. There are a lot of physical changes, and people assume that that's what causes the teen to go into crisis. But if you look at history, if you look at times way back, let's say when Jesus was born, there wasn't any crisis. A person became a teenager, they went through their teen years, they became an adult. And they didn't even consider teens to be teens. When a child got to be a certain age, they would sometimes go through a ritual, a meeting, some kind of thing where they demonstrated skills. They were a good hunter or they were a good fisher, or they had other kinds of things they went through, programs or whatever it was. There was some kind of an initiation rite. A lot of them had initiation rites that they went through at a certain age. And when they got through those initiation rites, they were an adult. You know, if you consider Mary and Joseph in the Bible story, and I'm just as an example, Mary was probably about 14 years old when she had Jesus. And we don't want to forget Joseph. Joseph was about the same age. He wasn't much older than she was, or maybe she was just her age. They were two, actually, we would consider them children. And they bonded, and Jesus was born, and you know the story. You know the story of Jesus, that Mary and Joseph are his parents. But the thing is, where was the trauma? There was not like a lot of teenage trauma, because once a girl started having her first monthly cycle, she was considered to be an adult and she could get married. So a lot of the girls got married when they were like 14, 15 years old because they had had their first monthly cycle, and so now they were considered to be adults. Boys went through a certain kind of initiation rite at a certain age, and at that point when they go through that initiation rite, they're adults. So there's not this period of time where there's a lot of storm and stress. That's caused by the societies as it exists today. But it is true also, and I don't want to say that there's no influence by the human body, because there's always influence by the human body. The hormones are changing. The child is growing, the boys are becoming men, the girls are becoming women, and there probably is stress with that. But the way that society has set up itself, there's a lot of exaggeration, a lot of things that affect us that they don't have in older time periods. You see, Mary could have Jesus. She could get married because she was old enough. She had her first cycle, and that was it. The storm and stress, that children feel when they're teenagers, a lot of it is produced by the society that we live in, with the violence and the agony and the dysfunctional families. So it's not all physiologically based. So if I can phrase that so it has some meaning for you, a lot of the storm and stress that a child suffers when they get to be in teenage years is caused by a dysfunctional situation in their homes or a dysfunctional situation in society. It's not all due to their physical changes in their bodies, although there's a lot of physical changes in their bodies that add to it, excuse me. So it is difficult to go through. So going on from here, it's too early. The children that are in our society, they are expected to be adults too soon. They're expected by the time they're 10 years old to date. They're expected by the time they're 12 years old to have a knowledge of the internet. And actually, they're losing their innocence too soon, and that's not good. In our society, life is very dysfunctional, and there's no clear age for them to be an adult because we don't live the same way as people used to live. Now, I think that we have to just deal with it. There's not going to be any change. Life is going to get more dysfunctional as time goes on, it seems to me. And we can't put a change to it. It's just something we have to live with. So how long does childhood last? When does a teen stop being a teen, and when do they become an adult? Do they become an adult when they go to college? Do they become an adult if they finish high school and get a job? When are they adults? Are they adults when they join the service? When they go and get their master's degree, when they just finish high school and settle down and get a job and have a family? There's no clear, precise time in our society where a child goes from being a teenager to an adult. So one person has come up with the idea, and I think they may be right, that a person is an adult when other people other than the family thinks they're an adult, when they start being treated as an adult, when they settle down and have a job and live their life and have a family and buy a house and do all the things that adults do, then they're an adult. There's no precise age time on this, and that's where the difficulty comes in. There's no precise age time on this. Excuse me a moment. So if you are going to school and you finish high school, and after high school you settle down, you get a job, a full-time job, then you're an adult then. You're not going on to further school because you don't want to, or you don't see any sense in it, or you're just not interested. If you go to school and then you finished high school and then you go on to college, it's as if your teenage years are extended until after you finish college. When you finish school and when you settle down, and the longer that you are in school, the longer your teenage period is, because you're not settled down until after you finish college. Well, what about a person who has 3 or 4 college degrees? I have 3 college degrees, so when would I settle down? And I didn't even get married. So you see, there's a lot of interplay here. There's a lot of blending of ages, but generally speaking, for most people, when they stop school and settle down, or if they go into service, when they start to have a career, then they're an adult. So there's no specific time period for that. For some people, it'll be right after high school. For some people, it'll be right after college. For some people, it'll be right after they get a degree or 2 in college or join the service. But it seems to vary from person to person, depending upon what their personal situation is. There is a growth spurt that occurs in a teenage person just before they hit the teen years. It's called the prepubescent growth spurt. It would occur at about ages 11, 12, 13. and the child just really shoots right up, and they become tall and all of that. Excuse me again. And then from there, the hormones kick in, and they develop secondary sexual characteristics. The girl becomes taller, but she also, the hip area expands, she gets fat pads, and she's readying, her body is readying for her to be able to have children. The guys, the voices get deeper, they get taller, they get more hair on their chest, and they're just larger. Those are secondary sexual characteristics, and it happens in the teen years. The teenager has an awful lot that they have to adjust to, because you stop to think, what is a teenager dealing with today that they maybe never had to deal with before? Well, for example, what are they going to do for a career? What are they going to do in terms of where they're going to live? How much education are they going to have? What kind of a job are they going to have? How are they going to settle down? And then when you say, and also, what is their philosophy of life going to be? What are they going to believe in? What kind of church are they going to go to if they go to church? What kind of philosophy do they run by? What kind of philosophy do they believe in? Now, this is important because the answer to these questions are going to determine what their income is, where they live, who their friends are, who their associates are. And you stop to think of it. If you're in the medical field and you decided to be a doctor, who do you want to live with? Who do you want to live around? Well, you want to live in the part of town that has an income that's equal to yours, so you have the same kinds of income, you have the same kinds of friends, they're all professional. And if you're not in that kind of bracket where you want to be a professional and you want to have just a regular job, which is fine, you're going to live in an area where everybody else has a regular job, which is fine. What about what you believe in? It's going to make a big difference what you believe in, because you're going to associate with people whose ideas and thoughts are pretty much the same as your own. You're not going to live with people that don't agree with you, and you're not going to live in sections of town where the people don't agree with you or they're different from you in some kind of way. So whatever you decide, or whatever a child decides in terms of what kind of education will they have, what their belief system is, who they're going to marry, the kind of person they're going to marry, all of these things play a part in their development and how they're going to be. Now, in the growth spurt I mentioned before, the prepubescent growth spurt, it starts really around age 11 or 12, and it continues up through and including the sophomore in high school. And at that point, the boys and the girls catch up with each other. As I've said before, but I need to repeat it, boys develop 2 years slower than girls do. Girls develop faster. So a 12-year-old girl is more like a 14-year-old. And she doesn't like boys because they're so immature, and of course they are, because they haven't caught up yet. But starting at about the sophomore age in high school, the boys catch up. So that by the time they graduate from high school, they're pretty much on an even keel. And so therefore they don't have the differences, and then they start really getting interested in each other, although I realize that happens earlier. When the boys start catching up, then the girls start to get interested in the boys, and then they form relationships and all of that. So they catch up with the girls eventually. Now the teen is not really mature until mid-20s. Adolescence is the entire change from the prepubescent growth spurt to puberty. Puberty is the height of the growth in the teen years, so prepubescence will start at about 13, 11, 12, 13, and then by the time the child gets to be about 16 or so, they're in puberty, which is the height of the growth of the teenager. Now, it's the cultural theme that teens have to deal with is basically finding themselves, who they are, who do they want to be, who do they want to emulate, what do they want to become. Finding themselves is a thing which they have to deal with, and there's no way when a teenager themselves knows when they've gone from being a teenager to an adult. They slip into it. I can remember when I got my first teaching job, suddenly I was an adult. I was no longer a college student. I went from getting my degree to teaching in a high school. I looked younger than a lot of the students. When I first walked into class, they thought I was another kid. But gradually, of course, they had to learn that I was the teacher and they had to pay attention to me and behave toward me as they need to behave toward me as a teacher. But children kind of just slip into adulthood because that's just the way the body is, and just this is the way culture is too. As I said before, when do you know when the child is an adult? They don't know either. You don't know, they don't know. But when they reach adulthood, you suddenly start treating them differently. You start treating them like adults, and then you know that they have reached adulthood. They have a job, they have their own finances that they're taking care of. They're starting to have children and raise children, so therefore they are adults. But there's no one initiation period where they can be an adult. So it's basically when they get a full-time job and they start supporting themselves that they're considered to be adults. But during this time, there is a lot of storm and stress. But society makes it necessary for them to deal with a lot of storm and stress. And with the things that go on in the news, which is terrible, and things that happen to other people, which is terrible, this causes a lot of the storm and the stress in their lives. Dysfunctional families. How do you handle dysfunctional families? If a family is dysfunctional, then the child is going to be dysfunctional too. They're going to learn it. Do you know that you can learn depression and you can learn dysfunction just by being around people that are dysfunctional? You learn it from them and it becomes a part of your life. If you are a child and you have absorbed that, then you can't help it. It's that way. You have a dysfunctional life because your parents do. And the society is just so discombobulated is the word I really want to use. If you know what I mean, society is just not stable. And if it's not stable, the children growing in it will not be stable either. And here again, this is where the parents come in. They need to protect their children. They need to make sure that children are living a normal kind of life. They have to protect them. They have to know what they're doing. And that's very important for them to pass through the adult to the adult years from adolescence. So the parents must relinquish at some point their authority over the child. As the child gets to be an adult, they have to relinquish their authority over them so that they can become an adult. And that's hard for them to do too. If you have taken care of a child because they are your child and they're immature, because of course they are, then when it comes time to let them go and let them be an adult, then that's hard to do for some parents. They want to hold on. They want to protect so much they can't gradually let go. So how do you allow your child to become an adult? You gradually let go. You don't hang on forever. You gradually let go. And then the child is pretty good in terms of accepting responsibility. Excuse me a minute. So the child is kind of caught between the adult culture and a child culture or a teenage culture, and they gradually get into adulthood and they slip kind of back and forth between the two, sometimes acting like a teen, sometimes acting like an adult, but eventually they get there. So If they manage with a career, find out what they want, and manage with their marriage, find out who they want to marry or if they want to stay single, and deal with their philosophy of life. Those are the three biggies. And when they have figured out all of that, you can understand why they're under stress. That's a lot to figure out for anybody. And a teenager, their bodies aren't stable because they're growing so fast. So you can understand some of the storm and stress, partly physiological and partly because the society puts it on them. But they make it somehow, and somehow they grow up and become adult. So I'm going to close it here. We'll be headed toward the middle age period for the next show, so please join me then.